I would like to say, obviously, this really isn't a school. It's your choice to attend. You don't need to make any excuses or get a note for not coming. People are going to criticize my appearances, but this is about content. And content is considered to be something that is offered by the accredited over the unaccredited. It was, after all, my father who was a doctor of philosophy of education, not me. I was merely a library clerk. If 5 people attend, that's a large audience for me. In school, to address 20 or 30 people for 5 minutes, you had to take a full course and stick to topic. So it is a privilege to talk about these issues, but it's also, in my view, very important. And there was a song once by Tracy Chapman called Talking About a Revolution. And we now see what they meant. I may be one of the few people who's talking about COVID as part of this revolution. But if you're concerned about the closing of schools, the safety of children, about many things that you've seen in your long life, what circumstances were when you were growing up, and if you're young, what you're being led to believe, you might want to tune in. David Icke is somebody who I watched who makes a living talking about 5 or 6 national security advisors like John Bolton and Zbigniew Brzezinski and the trauma they have visited upon the Middle East and Central America and so on through what he calls psychopathic, and I agree, justifications for bombing people rather than helping them, which would be a lot less expensive. And he has a sort of costume changing theory of the militant factions in the Middle East. He talks about the institutional barriers to helping the human rights movement in Lebanon, for example, posed by the barbaric Saudi Arabian regime who behead people and so on. And you can watch David, I can see that, but it's a limited hangout. It doesn't go into the same issues that I raise. And so, since I live in a community and have been nurtured to the state that I'm in part because a number of wise guys want to be able to challenge me with what you say about this, what you say about that, who have now closed our schools to get street brawls going. I thought I'd address, the human dimension of being deaf and 60 years old in the United States, having come through kidnapping and torture and the institutional arrangements that forbid anybody from coming to my defense. And in order to go into these things, you have to navigate a whole set of intelligent enterprises that divert from the issue that's personal, which as part of our commonwealth affects other people. I mean, it's not every day that you just ignore that somebody was tortured. As a contribution, I'm talking about this to advocate for much needed schools. And this is part of a concerted attack on our schools. I was attacked blindside as a child. And now we've been attacked blindside and our schools have been closed. And it's the same symbolism and the same purpose and the same regime doing these things. One of them, Robert Fripp, a royalist gossip monger. Used to talk about the society of an industry that he operated in, which was very popular culture oriented in America, as being malleable. He hails from Britain. And he couldn't make up his mind whether people were plastic meant something bad or whether plastic people was something good. You know, maybe it's the people where plastic is bad, but plastic people are good. I don't know. I couldn't get it straightened out listening to him. It was sort of the usual hogswash that you get from these progressives. But their venom is very real. I mean, the crimes that they commit are very real. So, you know, the malleability and the plastic nature of people was meant to manipulate them. And one of his allies, Cyril Wecht, who authored Grave Secrets, that shouldn't be overlooked. One of his chums in the Jewish community was recently arrested for museum theft, and he, by the way, was the person who reported JFK's brain missing from the National Archives. And his buddy is now arrested for museum theft. He likes to pander to the nativist sensibilities in America. When he goes to court, he likes to say to the people, you know, I trust your wisdom and so on. And this conveyances them to resonate, we will trust you because you trust us. But it's nativist stuff. It's manipulation of their reality by appeal to their ego. And what we see in the situation that surrounds me is an attempt to profit from years and years and years of sadism and cruelty by saying, well, there's sadism and cruelty out there. And they wrote a nativist document that came from the Carousel Club, apparently, the crowd behind the Texas school book, I call it. So you have this situation where people know I'm talking, and because they lied about the neuroplasm they inflicted, and what they were trying to do was prevent me from getting help for it while they tried to get me to self-destruct, they locked me up in a mental institution. And basically, you know, I had to write things in pencil. These were my notes from a Christmas I spent before I went home to Pittsburgh. They had banned me from school in Seattle. And when I went back to Pittsburgh, a girl who taught me sign language was attacked and raped. And when Courtney Kennedy wrote to me, the Kennedys were attacked and then were murdered. So Seattle's obviously very intense about what they're doing, particularly to me. And of course now to you, the specific, they think globally, but they act locally. So, you know, and they made up these terrible laws about me that they called, you know, authoritarian diagnosis, and they're always threatening to move again. But I managed to make it to honors in schools, so it's not as easy for them to just arrest me and say I'm lying or something, you know. But one of the things I picked up on while I was there was this book called In a Voice of Her Own, which is about how Iranian women, and women in general who couldn't get recognition for their views, worked the society that they were in towards their will. And when we're dealing with, from Carnegie Mellon University and the recovery program, the Green Party movement, Black Lives Matter, which has manipulated the puppet masters, Bill Gates at Microsoft, and his cartel that locked everybody in their home and can make money through Amazon and Microsoft and control everything now, was part of a group who brought false witness against me as prostitution drama. Prostitution drama is just like Hollywood. They get somebody to say something and act a certain way, whether make, you know, angry eyes or tearful gestures, looking very realistic. They never managed to actually come up with anybody who could meaningfully claim that I had done anything wrong to them, but they have the ideology and friction of the Christian right wing behind them. So the fact that you even kissed is for them pornography. And of course, they're sponsoring really serious pornography with major drama. You know, it's in fashion in the circle that wrote the Texas school book to act out rape and then sell it as legal, certified, copywritten pornography. And all of this nativist discourse from the Carousel Club that killed Kennedy as an advertisement for their wares traces back to John Lennon's influence and Yoko Ono's influence. So they had to be very slippery. And one of the ways that they were very slippery was to normalize for them talk of rape. You know, Ken Crimson sings about rape, and Peter Gabriel and Genesis sing about rape and sort of normalize it and glorify it. And while at the same time they were doing this, they were taunting and laughing about zapping John Kennedy right between the eyes. And, you know, they blew his mind out in a car. And for the benefit of Mr. Kite, they put on a special show and satisfaction guaranteed against the United States in the revenge crime of the royal family for the Axis. Satisfaction guaranteed to King Edward's friends like Adolf Hitler. And we've been buying protection payments all through the monster years of Reagan and Bush. We've been paying protection payments, allowing ourselves to be scared. I mean, Trump had no problem putting on a bomb scare with his buddy from North Korea. Just scare people. And they tortured me, but then they made it look like I was just a sissy who was easily scared, so it was really funny to be cruel to me. But they had implanted their expert in forcing people and coercing people into obeying them. So you have a situation where Hollywood is getting into the mind of the specific symbolic executive magnitude type character that they've embraced with this family of Hollywood pigeons who are pecking at the idea of this person being an educated or enlightened person who has anything to offer, while setting it up for a big sale and a big kill the way they executed JFK. And everyone knows that Clint Eastwood is watching this case closely. He even seems to be charmed by the issue of his own complicity in the matter. But Charles Bronson had a namesake in Dealey Plaza. I've often said, since he put out The Mechanic, we should look at the way that namesakes were being used. You know, Clint Hill and Hill Clinton just flip of the switch, you know. And stolen wife was something that Charles Bronson used to bray about, you know, as part of his legend that he stole man's wife. So, you know, what Jackie Kennedy did flying off to Beatlemania and the Argentinians who were hiding Hitler is notorious as something Alan Dulles pulled while they were wiring up the Man from U.N.C.L.E. on television shows. But there was also imagery involved. Like I've described in some of my blog writings how The Outsiders was read to us by somebody who knew I was afraid for my life and disappeared for months, and they never looked for me or called home, even when I washed up deaf and terribly traumatized, biting my fingernails, bleeding. I was sent to the office for that one, even though the church across the street locked me out so that a gang could get me, and everybody knew that. There were these, he was reading us The Outsiders, and the eidetic vision, which means the images in the mind, were filled by people who were in this gang in my environment. So they were playing a game of, eidetic vision being real, sort of. You know, the mind within, you know, like the lust in your heart being temptation by Satan, I suppose, is where that was going. But the images of the man who attacked and tortured me, his veins popped out, just like the mechanic. And Linda Harrington's father, by her ring, looked like Charles Bronson, had a hidden room in his attic. And, they stowed me various places when I was hiding from people who were looking for me to kill me, it seemed. I thought I was the only victim. And even when I tried to get help about the AIDS attack, when I realized what was going on, they just stalled, denied it, and then threw the COVID bomb. So it's very telling that they can get away with this so openly. Like Wirechat had people bragging on every channel about killing the Kennedys in the days that followed. So one things that they did to our public schools was to, you know, get rid of a potential teacher. Like in South Africa, they were going to poison Mandela's brain, and they decided against it. Why? Because they thought it would be so much more interesting if they could get the NAACP to laugh about poisoning a white child's brain and then exploiting it. And that's what they did. So the whole question of John Lennon death being a Houdini act is written into the play. They wouldn't have risked the idea of Mark David Chapman not getting him. It was all set up to make sure that it looked like he was killed, but they evacuated him to safety. And the way that you can prove that, for example, is that Fripp was all setting up with found art. In '79, he was talking about found art already. So the Slipknot happened, when Davy Jones and Jocelyn showed up at Duquesne. And so you have Jocelyn Elders is already written into the script because the elders were going to be told this happy tale. Mandela was going to be elevated and released, and apartheid was going to be abolished. And we would get over the hurdle of AIDS. Just as our grannies were swept aside and Black Lives Matters was promoted. And this is a foreign control switchboard. They don't care about us. We've been paying them protection payments for years and years and years, and they've jacked up the price, $1 trillion. Microsoft control of everything, nuclear bombs, all of this stuff that we don't need, and which is ridiculous. So they can squeeze the news and say it's payback time, and kill 200,000 of us and collect, by smashing our economic system. And Trump's laughing all the way back to his robber barons in India about it. So what we see is that it was all clockwork for satisfaction guaranteed to the Axis, a vast system of protection payments that they're now collecting on. And if you look at it locally, they have these vagabond groups in place. I've made clear to people like, Penis Gabriel and the Green Parties, Aaron Dixon, all the show-offs at Tacoma who went off and fought in the Middle East and killed people and then came back filled with rage to pick on a deaf, aging sissy, make them feel big and stuff. And they say, well, what are you going to do with the money if you get a settlement for your injuries? Well, I'm going to indulge myself. I'm not going to do anything with it that's any of your business. And if you look at the net store flyers, people try to help with the issue of graffiti, educating about the damage it does if it's not handled properly, and to show that there are channels where graffiti can be useful and meaningful and develop the arts. And when a guy jumps down to jump and holler and he's doing like this here and doing like that there, there's so many better things to spend your money on. Well, I saw a girl from Yemen or Syria who was crying for her life, and it would have been a better thing to spend your money on her. But the guys at this jump and holler stuff are the type who make sure that the money is diverted. I'm there with Oliver North. They're experts in diversions of funds. And they want to take away your right to the pursuit of happiness as an American with this jump and holler stuff. And they've been serving as the ground troops for Microsoft's expertise in the study of, uh, you know, using the problems that exist in human society to make sure that they get their way, and you can, in a proper society, you go to school to understand poverty, and you try to be helpful meaningfully to people like that girl in Syria. But if you go back to the Vatican in the age of the great dictators, you realize that musicians like Pavarotti and the power of music has long been around and being planned for manipulating um, and contradicting America's systems of higher education and diverting funds away from legitimate enterprises and helping people, which you find in academics and private benefactors and people who are concerned with working with immigrants at the borders. And you have institutions that are set up to foil this, like Tavistock Institute, who see John Kennedy is on the wrong side in the war for the world. And what they did was they put out songs like Easy to Be Hard and I Don't Know How to Love Him from the spiritual quest of the community. And they have an agenda, of course, and they're with you know, the Jesus people. And they have a master plan that comes from pornography, of which they say is spiritual corruption, and they want to divert any funds. They don't want anybody to be free or happy. They just want to make sure that they jump down at the jumping holler and challenge your right to think squarely about what they've done. Like if you go to the clubhouse, I was at the clubhouse. I've done other things. I've taken photographs of Chinatown. I was even some graffiti that was illegal that I admired. And I worked as an editor for the poetry magazine at the college. And for 12 years I did editorials for the clubhouse, and it was quite a newsletter. And I thought these people were my friends, but no, they poisoned me. And they chemically castrated me when they were the experts in forcing people to obey them. And when they were finished with me, they said, "You have no right to have children." Well, and they chopped that woman in Massachusetts, And this is Microsoft's idea of a benevolent left-wing revolution. They're experts in forcing people to go against their choice. And they claim that this stuff is all watermarked with the Lenin name, that Yoko Ono adopted it. And they set up Black Lives Matter against your grannies like a Nazi Sophie's choice, If you don't sacrifice your grannies, you hate the black man. The whole idea of the credibility being linked to your willingness to have personal enrichment comes from sharks on high. Like I saw Kabbalah Harris saying, "Oh, we won't tax you if you make under $400,000." Under $400,000. This is ridiculous. I've never lived above the poverty line. $9,000 a year or something, and they march around, making up songs in their kinder, gentler totalitarianism, like Preppy Shoes Blues by Stuart Shepard, who came from Kenyon College, and he sings about Preppy Shoes Blues about the Brooks Brothers. Well, the Brooks Brothers are the blacks and whites who walked all over Jimmy Carrere and said, "Get rid of the white liberal, and we'll just exploit him." He's a liberal moron. Women don't want anything to do with him. They just laugh at the idea that he feels guilty. And one of the things we know about Charles Bronson and Hollywood is that in The Mechanic itself, prostitution drama was part of the book and novel and film. That's one of the things that happens in the course of the movie, is they make up a story. So Then they come in and start saying they're doing linguistic sleuthing for nativist scholars who are a higher order of intelligence and will check out every word in his vocabulary to see who influenced it. So, because they could claim him as their slave, and they'd say, oh, he copied a picture of porno. If that was my picture of porno, it would be for sale. I could make $10 on it. I've never tried to sell any of that stuff. In fact, I very generously did a portfolio for one of those women for free. So it's allowed by this society because of this business about Lenin. But my father used to have a saying, let's not say we did. He called his album Double Fantasy. And even though they had it all in motion, it was all planned, goes back to the 40s, 50s in cinema, you can see them all leading to it. The key concept of found art is in Robert Fripp's work the year before John Lennon stepped out. They used that as the key feature of their sale, that it has a watermark. So these people are allowed to torture, kidnap, and prostitute and demand, you know, financial control over the curiosity product of this, horrible and horrendous and evil crime against a deaf person who's, and now they'll say you're too old. What does it make a difference to you anymore? So that's the situation, and I must say I was in good faith with them for a while before I realized what they were doing. I used to have an Aaron Dixon button on my hat, you know. I thought I thought they were the good guys, but that's just pretense. They refuse to leave somebody who hates them alone. And I have been warning you that they started AIDS, now they blow us up with COVID. So it's obviously they don't care about our society. I don't see how anybody could mistake them for caring about our society. Well, before I sign off, I'm going to go once more through a couple of notes just to make sure that nothing I wanted to go into gets overlooked. Oh, in addition to the chemical castration and demanding that I go along with their plans, and that while they're singing easy to be hard stuff, they have psychiatric control and punisher systems in place. So, it's not like my telling people what really happened is going to make a whole lot of difference to them when it comes to, their extraordinarily vicious and selfish revolution.